as we were here just 6 months ago, telling all of you, the same folks that were in this room, that something had to be done. And unfortunately, when our constituents, when our neighbors opened up their Eversource and UI bills, their utility bills, just a couple weeks ago or a week ago or so, they saw what we said would be a problem 6 months ago. We told all of you in this room, we told the majority in the legislature that we had to do something then, immediately, that our ratepayers, our neighbors, our constituents couldn't afford to live in what is already an unaffordable state to begin with. We begged for them to take up these proposals. Most of these were completely rejected, summarily, most of which never even got a public hearing. They were not interested in addressing the issues we felt had to be addressed. And we're here today to say enough is enough. Our ratepayers are paying too much. There is zero reason Connecticut should be the second highest state in the United States of America when it comes down to electricity rates. It has to end. So once and for all, we have the proposals we came to you with in February. The ARPA stuff is out the window. We have ways we can address that, we believe. But that was one aspect of the proposal. That was then used for operational expenses instead. But we did ask for the ARPA funds to be used towards mitigating this moratorium expense and softening this bill. And then also looking at the future and finding ways to stop the bleeding essentially from these exponentially rising electricity rates. So we're here once again to call on the governor, call us into special session now. This is an emergency. Let's address you. Let's stop the bleeding. And let's once again make our electric rates in this state affordable. It is ridiculous where we've gotten to where we've gotten. Them done nothing about it, and we're once again here telling them to let's do something about it. We're here today to do something about it.
I had a constituent the other day that came up to me and asked me why his electric bill was $2,000 for a month. I live in New Milford. We're not talking about the Gold Coast here somewhere. $2,000. It's ridiculous. But I'm happy we're here. I'm actually really happy we're here to discuss some of this. One of my big pushes that I had, and we all stepped up for, was the public benefit charge to be seen on the bill. The public benefit charge has been something tucked into the bill for years. Now the transparency is there. And that's a tremendous help for people to be able to see. And quite frankly, that's why the constituents are so fired up and quite frankly, ticked off right now. As well they should be, because they can finally see all these extra fees that is the government just reaching in again for extra money, big grab, further taxation in a new way. As Vinny mentioned, back in February, we came out here and we proposed using some of the...
The common sense is we carried this moratorium for 4 years, which is way too long. It's way too long. The RAM adjustment calls for about a fifth of that RAM adjustment to be to pay back some of this money on the moratorium. Common sense would be fiscally responsible, take those ARPA funds that we have, and while there's great ideas, everyone has great ideas in this building, we're chock full of them. But the smart idea is a little fiscal responsibility. Let's take those ARPA funds and pay that down, because all these people were paying their bills this entire time should not be covering that for the rest of the state. Those ARPA funds should be allocated to cover the RAM adjustment. And I'm not telling Pura how to do their job. We're offering a solution. We're not here to point fingers and cause problems. We're here to present solutions for everybody. So I think it's a common sense solution that will drive people a little more acceptable to where they feel they need their bill to be. We got a lot more work ahead of us, but this is one step we can make as a common sense solution for every ratepayer in the state. Thank you.
Why did we get ARPA dollars? It was post-pandemic. Why did we let people not pay their bill for 4 years? That's post-pandemic. It aligned properly. At the time, that money is education. And it's not a great cause. But that's not what that money was intended for, and it's not where it should be used best. I kind of equate it to if someone asks you to dinner. Vinny, you want to go to dinner? I invite them out to dinner. We go to dinner. Then I ask the entire restaurant to pay for our dinner for 4 straight years. That's unacceptable. No one in that restaurant expected that. No one asked for that. No one had any input to that. They're just being told, you're buying. I do want to say one more thing, too. A couple of months ago, the majority party wanted to come in and rediscuss the big green monster, which would only have increased the dollars on the bill from this point, too. We're asking to go to special session again to drop that down. The people are screaming from the rooftops. It's time we do something. Let's get politics aside, put the people first, and bring that bill down.
You know, it does feel like Groundhog Day all over again. I think it was about 6 months that we were in this very room suggesting proposals to mitigate the problems that we've seen with our electric bills. And I'm not sure how long it's going to take before the other side of the aisle would actually acknowledge our proposals and incorporate them for relief for the taxpayers. You know, we are all just as outraged as our residents when they opened up their electric bill and saw the massive inflation to their bill. And now we see electricity joining the chorus of other items like gas and groceries that are hitting Connecticut residents. And to me, when we see the wake of surpluses and money, overflowing into the pension funds, our higher education institutions receiving the bulk of the ARPA funding, government is the beneficiaries of itself, not the people. You know, we were frustrated when the Democrats decided to so-called not do a budget at all and left it up to the governor to make all the decisions and all the fixes. You know, today, it shouldn't be lost on any of us that the FAC committee is going to be upstairs transferring upward of $75 million to take care of our state workers for a pension shortfall that we were statutorily obligated to make, that the Democrats didn't put in their budget, that Republicans actually had incorporated into our budget, and they are today ignoring 3.5 million residents who have been hit with electric bills and are afforded no relief. So today you're going to hear from a couple of our proposals that we've already have brought up in the past. And I think I want to just touch on PURA. You know, we talked about needing to separate PURA, but even more specifically, to make the appointments that are statutorily obligated to make. We are supposed to have 5 members on that commission. Right now, we have 3. There's 1 new appointment. I believe there might be someone retiring. The other 2 are serving at the whim of the governor. And the significance of that is now we've seen our electric decisions go from an autonomous body to an organization that has moved into a spare room in the governor's office where they're making decisions behind closed doors, and it's being micromanaged by our governor's office. That is not the way our electric rates are supposed to be done. And so this burden is falling on us to try to come up with solutions. We should be looking at the procurement process. We are on the heels of an RFP being approved to procure wind to the tune of triple of what our nuclear cost is. We've got to examine that. And the proposal to cap these contracts will prevent Connecticut in being reckless in spending taxpayer money.
Setting aside all the details of month-to-month changes in electricity bills, all of our residents know a couple of things. First, that electricity is just too damn high in this state. And it's a necessity. It's not an option for anybody, especially on the hottest days and the coldest days of the year. Second, we know that state policies, state leadership bears some responsibility for Connecticut's electricity costs being the second or the third highest in the entire country. And third, leaders in this state must act to reverse those policies and make Connecticut's electricity rates more affordable for the short, medium, and long term. We can do that. We're not here simply to cast blame. We're here to offer solutions as House and Senate Republican caucuses. And that's why over the past 2 years we have consistently put forward long-term energy proposals that we think will reduce costs. In fact, we know will reduce costs for the long term, while also shoring up reliability of the electricity grid and ensuring that we protect our environmental considerations as well. We have updated, but we mostly are reiterating those proposals from the last 2 years. First, we need an all-of-the-above clean energy strategy in this state. We should not have the state constantly picking winners and losers among sources of clean energy. That means all forms of nuclear, all forms of hydro, and other more reliable and affordable forms of clean energy should be on equal footing in the state state's renewable portfolio standard with wind and solar and other sources of energy. We need to cap the rate that the state forces procurements for energy in our state. The state forces us to buy certain types of energy at a fixed long-term rate. Maybe they need to do that, but it shouldn't be at the cost 2, 3, or 4 times higher than the competitive market for electricity. We need to cap those government-directed purchases of electricity. We need to shore up our natural gas supply, especially for winter, especially when we see demand rising for electricity in the long run. It is not acceptable to have elderly or sickly people in the future have to worry about whether they're going to be able to heat their homes on 0-degree days. But we all know that that is the direction New England and Connecticut are heading in 10 or 20 years' time. So we need to study actionable ways for the state to shore up a more affordable natural gas supply, especially for the winter, that could help reduce costs for our electric grid, make it actionable both from the west and from the east. We need to look at moving all those public policy charges out of your electric bill and into the normal appropriations and budgetary process, whereby it competes with all other important sources of government spending and government programming, but is evaluated every 2 years for its costs and benefits on the merits. I think that's only fair. Some of these programs should continue to exist, but they should be reevaluated and tweaked through the normal budgetary process. You should not be forced to pay a hidden tax in your electricity bill every month as a matter of course. That is contributing to Connecticut having the highest electricity rates in the country. We should look at restructuring our energy regulatory bodies, yes, so there is more certainty, so there is more independence, and so that customers can have more certainty about the regulatory structure in Connecticut, that they will not be subject to, shall we say, malfeasance by any of the utilities as well. There is so much we can do in this state to make Connecticut more affordable for everyone, to grow our economy, to ensure that seniors on a fixed income or lower income families do not have to choose between their rent, their medication, their electricity bill, or anything else from month to month. We need to create jobs. We need to make our economy grow. We need to make Connecticut better than ever before. We can do that by going into special session and reforming our energy policy in this state to make it more affordable for the short, medium, and long term. All of us are confident that we can do that. All of us believe in governing, in leading, not just casting stones. That's what this announcement is about.
Hello, this is State Senator Ryan Fazio. This month, so many of us opened our electricity bill to see yet another increase in electricity rates. That's unacceptable in a state that already has the second or third highest electricity rates in the continental U.S. This month's increase was due to an increase in the public benefits portion of the bill, which is roughly 15 different government programs that are funded through our electricity bills. That's a hidden tax as far as I'm concerned. And the specific increase this month was due to the socialized costs from a shut-off moratorium in Connecticut to unpaid electricity bills that was open-ended, that anyone was allowed to avail themselves of, even if they were a millionaire, even if they're in good health. That lasted far longer and was far more open-ended than in other states, and so our arrearages that we're all paying now through our electricity bill were far greater than in other states around the country. I actually co-authored a plan earlier this year that would have called for paying off those arrearages with the one-time federal monies. That plan was rejected by the majority leadership, unfortunately, and therefore we're stuck with this bill, this increase in rates this month that we never should have been stuck with in the first place. But more importantly, Connecticut's electricity costs have been too high for too long for any number of reasons. Hey everybody, back home. I'm here with some of my favorite constituents. My kids, my family comes first, but they're great constituents of mine, and they're also great resources and representatives for the districts back home, Pat and Bill. We were up here today trying to fight to reduce these energy rates. All of you saw it when you opened up your mail this past week and saw the ridiculous increase you've seen in your Eversource bills. And we were up here today saying enough is enough. We're asking to go into special special session to make short-term and long-term changes to our electric rates here in Connecticut to make it much more affordable. Connecticut is unaffordable to begin with. We're the second highest energy rates in the entire country. That is unacceptable. We're asking to go into special session immediately. It's an emergency. You deserve better from your government, and that's what we're up here talking about today. In addition to these two great men being the representatives in the 30th District, they're also the ranking member of Environment and the ranking member of the Energy Committee, respectively, doing great work for us. So they have a great insight into how to reduce these energy rates. I'm going to spin it over first to Representative Callahan, the ranking member of the Environment Committee.
Thank you, Senator. We, of course, are all very concerned with the environment. We want clean air. We want clean water. But we continue to lump these fees and costs onto the ratepayer. We need to find the best, the cleanest, and the most affordable way to generate power in Connecticut. Right now, we don't have an energy policy that's sustainable. If we're going to do the EV forced on us, if we're going to do heat pumps forced on us, we don't have the supply. We have to get better supply to help our businesses, help our homes, and help people afford. With the skyrocketing cost of insurance, food, energy, we just can't afford it. We need to bring those down by getting lower energy costs, which will help our businesses and help our constituents.
And then we also have Representative Buckby, who's doing a great job as the ranking member of the Energy Committee.
Thank you, Steve. Here's the thing. The public benefit charge that you see on your bill is not a new tax. It's a line item that's finally been moved in there. We pushed for that last year, and that's why now you have more transparency and you can see how much the government is taking out of that bill. It's a double tax, the way I see it. So what we need to do with these ARPA funds that we can reallocate, make that work and pay that down for some of the people. But we have to look, if the government is going to tell you they're spending money on this, the government should allocate it in the budget. You should be able to see it. We should be able to vote on what that's going to be and not just take it out of your pocket in your electric bill.
So once again, we're calling on the governor to call us into special session. Let's reduce these energy rates now. You back home deserve better.
We hear you.
All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mike Sennello Show on the eve of the opening of session at the Connecticut State Legislature, which is going to happen tomorrow morning. That's the 8th of January. And I'm absolutely sure, as we do a preview of what's to come in 2025, this being the very first episode of the Mike Sennello Show of the year of 2025, is going to be dominated by one topic. And of course, it's our electric bills. For those of us who have not been living under a rock for the last however long, I'm sure you understand just how expensive it is to operate electricity in Connecticut. As many of you have seen from the article that was run in the Hartford Courant, Connecticut has the highest average monthly electric bills in all of Connecticut. This is up from fourth from the last time we talked about this. And not only is it the highest electric bills in America on average, it is the third highest electric rates in America, behind only Hawaii, which is an archipelago in the Pacific that has to ship in absolutely everything, and California, who is the state that's utterly infamous for its electrical rationing and for its consistent and constant rolling brownouts. I'll point out very briefly that this is from lendingtree.com. The last time we looked, this is the most recent data. This is most recently published in the Hartford Courant. But because of the giant Hearst paywall, we have to go to the source, which is what we should be doing anyway. Instead of relying on going to media outlets, we should be going to the source itself and looking at the data that the media outlet is relying on itself. So as a result of everybody opening up their electric bills this past year and seeing just how expensive things are. And by the way, let's go back to that just real briefly. You'll see in the top 10, as we scroll down, both states, the states of New Hampshire and Maine, in terms of the rate, are lower than Connecticut. These states are in New England. So these are absolutely comparable states. But we also know that when it comes to Maine and New Hampshire, they are both much, much colder and much more rural, which would mean that delivery, actually getting electricity to each person, can't be, the overhead costs of that, installing power lines, can't be distributed among way more people the way it could if you were living in a giant city. So what the hell is going on here? Why are we doing this? Why are things so expensive. We've gone over this 100 times on the channel, but we're going to do it again because tomorrow is the opening of session in Hartford, and this is where the problems are coming from. They're a regulatory issue. They are not a market issue. And again, we talked about this last time. The core of the outrage, of course, isn't just that the rates are going up. It's where they're going up. Your electric bill is divided into 4 different parts. We all know this. And the fourth part is where the rates, in terms of pennies or dollars per kilowatt hours, that's where those rates are going up. That's where the rates are increasing. That's why public benefits are becoming a greater percentage of your bill. So we're going to look into why that is, but first things first, for those of you who don't think that you should be paying for public benefits, of course, there is the public benefits page on Facebook, the Ban Public Benefits Charge Eversource UI Facebook page, which I'm sure a lot of you are coming from. If you are, thank you. Welcome. You're about to be bombarded with data and information like you probably never have been. And for those of you who aren't coming from this page, do check it out because they bring up a good point. And, to be toward that end, with session opening up tomorrow morning, I've created a Discord server. And what this will allow us to do is to add to our resources here. This isn't to get people to move away from the Facebook page. This is to add to your proverbial bag of tricks. Discord tends to be a better place for organizing multiple events, and it tends to be a more useful tool for grassroots organizing of actual action, which is what I want to see moving forward. I want to actually resolve these problems. I'm on board with the complaints, but we're going to get to at the end of this video, we're going to get to those solutions. And I want to hear from you guys too about all of this, because at the end of this video, like we always do, there will be a live audience Q&A, so get your questions and comments into the comments section on Facebook and YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube and you want to watch on Facebook, link is in this video's description and vice versa. So I'll drop, I'm going to drop the Discord link right now. This is the invite link. We're going to drop this into, we'll drop this into YouTube real quick. All right, there's YouTube, and then we'll drop this into Facebook as well. There's the link I just shared is the Discord invite link. Please do check it out. We're going to have I've already scheduled a virtual meetup for Wednesday night at 7 so that the folks from that group can actually, at least virtually, meet each other for the first time. And, maybe chat and converse and run through some ideas, especially as it relates to actually working solutions to all of this, to all of the problems that are taking place here. As I mentioned, legislative session starts tomorrow. That's January 8th, Wednesday morning. And when it comes to the public benefits, it is important to know where they actually come from. So I'm going to show you some articles that you guys have already seen, and the responses. I know these are bad articles, but it is important to know your enemy. And I'm sure you guys have seen drivel, utter drivel, like this Reddit post that seems to be getting the full charge of the commies of Reddit. Or maybe you've seen just as awful load from the Hartford Current. What drives electric rate charges in Connecticut? A confluence of issues. And you'll see that everything is broken on this page because, yes, at the top of the page, I've had to go to the Wayback Machine and look up an archive version of this because of the giant Hearst Media paywall that won't allow you to read this article without that. I'm sure you guys have all read this, and it's just as bad as what is being said on Reddit. Perhaps you've also seen this video from WTNH on their YouTube channel or on TV, WFSB, from their YouTube channel or on any of their their conventional and TV stations. And although the video from WFSB is a little bit better, it's still basically just terrible. And we're going to come back to that piece from WFSB. But in short, the entire focus of these things is that the origin of not only these charges, but the cost of these charges, is deregulation, which supposedly happened in the late 1990s. And then, didn't really take effect until 2006, 7, and 8. But when it comes to deregulation, first things first, this was the right thing. And we're going to come back to this. We're going to provide video evidence of this being the case. For those of you who don't remember what it was like in the 90s when we were dealing with state-owned electrical services, you don't for those of us who weren't there or who were just too young to remember, maybe you don't remember just how bad that service was. CLNP, when it was owned directly by the state and when it was managed by the elected officials in Hartford directly, refused to do the necessary maintenance around the lines. They refused to do regular pruning. They refused to maintain sharrows. They refused to maintain access ways. They refused to take down obviously hazardous trees that should have been taken down. And when this thing finally started to deregulate and finally started to privatize, you know, the motto of "that's the way it's always been done" was carried for years after, until we ran into the infamous ice storm of October 31st, 2010, when almost everyone in Connecticut lost power and where at least hundreds of thousands of customers were without power for weeks. This is a storm that damn near killed my grandmother when we found her shivering and blue in the face after almost a week of no electricity in her home when it was freezing cold outside. And for the record, thank God they've changed their policies, first things first, but thank God it went to the private sector where they have to deal with this, where they actually have to answer to market influences, which didn't really happen when it comes to Eversource until 2012 when they merged with Northeast Utilities. Second thing, the deregulation is an obvious misnomer. These industries and these companies are so heavily regulated that the quote-unquote private companies are just proxies for the state. And we will come back to the 77% coming from Millstone argument that these articles that emerged from deregulation are harping on. That whole Reddit post, that whole dumb article from the Hartford Current, and most of what that WFSB video was focusing on was the fact that when it comes to the public benefits charges, 77% of the increases had been coming from a prior Millstone agreement. But before we get to that, because that's a practical argument, let's get into the principal argument. You shouldn't have to pay for somebody else's bills. And it is obviously true that a portion of public benefits are recompensing Eversource for the money they lost when in 2020, in response to the COVID outbreak, the state said you cannot shut off people's powers if they refuse to pay. This went on for 4 years. Pretty much every other state in the union did something like this, but it was done and over with in 2 years in every single state except for Connecticut. Connecticut's extension was 2 years, longer than the entire rest of the U.S. And for 2 years, you and I, who are actually paying our bills because we're not degenerates, because we're not derelicts, because we're responsible human beings, paid for all those other people's bills. And now we're going to pay for it again when it comes to that offset, which of course Eversources do, right? Like they were told you can't possibly collect. You have no mechanism of enforcing any actual collection. And so a ton of Eversource customers said, well, I ain't paying my bills. Time value of money. Go F yourself. And the people that got screwed are you and me on this. And for the record, Republicans in the State House had a plan for this almost a year ago. You guys saw it in the bumper video. For those of you who got here a few minutes early, 17-minute long video of what House Republicans and Senate Republicans have been doing for all of 23 to deal with this. This was a one-time cost. Once the moratorium ends, it's it. That's it. This is a one-time cost. And there was ARPA money, American Rescue Plan Act money, that was handed to the state of Connecticut from the Fed. And yes, I understand it's just printing money, but it's already been printed. It's already there. So this would have 100% covered this one-time cost. And this wouldn't have been part of your public benefit charges. And also, by the way, on that, of the remaining 23%, other things on that public benefits charges included things like offsets for EV charger installations and for solar installations on residential roofs. Other things like grants to various universities. You may like those things, but spend your own money on it. They shouldn't be coming out of everyone's electric bills by force. If you want to donate to grants, then donate toward grants. If you want to donate towards these universities, donate towards those universities. If you want to put an EV charger, if you want to install an EV charger, then do it. If you want to charge your electric vehicle and you want to have that installation in your home, do it. You pay for it, not me. Not me. There's no reason for you and I to be paying for somebody else's expenses. Same thing with solar installations. You want to put a new roof on your house? You want to put solar panels on your roof? On your roof? I'm not telling you not to, but you get to pay for it, not me, and not the rest of the people who have to pay these electric bills. Especially those of us who are having a really hard time paying those electric bills, which I would imagine is the majority of customers. All of these things. There's 41 of these items, by the way. 41 of these items that are just handouts, right? All of these things might be fine in and of themselves, but they shouldn't be on the electric bills. They should be voted on the House floor at the absolute most. And this was part of the GOP's proposals. Again, you guys saw this in the bumper video, and we've talked about this endlessly on the show. The left's only, of course, the response, of course, from the other side is, well, it's the millstone is 77% of that bill. It's only 23%. Okay, but we're making a principled argument. That shouldn't be on the bill. End of story. This isn't something you should be charging somebody else. We believe in agency. We believe in liberty. And you should have the liberty to do with your money basically as you so please. It's your money. How much electricity you want to consume in your home should be your responsibility. How you want that electrical consumption to take place should be your decision to make. And then, of course, when these articles talk about that 77% from Millstone, because we've covered the principled argument, let's go ahead and dispel with the facts. Let's get the actual facts out. Excuse me, I turned up my headphone volume. We have to get the actual facts out, because where did that 77% from Millstone come? What was the actual origins of this? Now, those articles and WFSB and the Redditor, the commies of Reddit, seem to think that it all originates from Republicans voting along strict party lines in a 2019 agreement, Millstone agreement, right? And we're going to Mott and Bailey that 2019 agreement with the 2016 agreement. And they don't want to mention why it is people voted like that. And that's not how people voted in the first place, which we'll come back to. But the real origins of all of this nonsense are Executive Order 46, signed into law at the pen and whim of Democrat Governor Daniel P. Malloy. Whereas this administration is committed to ensuring that Connecticut remain a national leader in addressing climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions through innovative energy policy, as in by force. Whereas in 2008, Connecticut returned greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels and has committed to further reducing emissions to 10% below 1990 levels by 2020 and to 80% below 2001 levels by 2050. Whereas the state is in a position to achieve the 2020 target well ahead of schedule. False, and we'll come back to that. Whereas in order to meet the ambitious 2050 target, coordination among state agencies, local governments, businesses, industry, and non-governmental organizations is necessary, as this diversity of perspectives will ensure that policy and program recommendations are more robust, as in we're forcing literally everyone to do this, because the only way that we're going to make this happen is to cram it down your throats. Whereas the Governor's Steering Committee on Climate Change, originally established in 2002, included only state agency personnel and has been inactive since 2011. And whereas, in the light of the need for diverse stakeholders, there we go, there's another 1984 word, to collaborate, there's some newspeak, by the way, to collaborate to establish the means for achieving long-term greenhouse gas emissions reductions, the Governor's Steering Committee on Climate Change should be dissolved and a new council established to fill its mission. Now, therefore, and this is where the order actually takes place, I, Daniel P. Malloy, Governor of the State of Connecticut, by virtue of the power and authority vested in me by the Constitution of the State of and by the statutes of the State of Connecticut, do hereby order and direct. The existing Governor's Steering Committee on Climate Change is hereby disbanded. 2, there is established a new Governor's Council on Climate Change, the Governor's Council on Climate Change, GCCC, GC3. We're going to come back to that momentarily. that shall examine the efficacy of existing policies and regulations designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and identify new strategies to meet the established emission reduction targets. The council shall meet at least quarterly, whatever. Establish interim goals that, if met, will ensure that the state will achieve the 2050 target, which we'll come back to. So this is where the committee is establishing the interim goals. And we're going to come back to that. Trust me. Monitor greenhouse gas emissions levels, whether the state is poised to meet their interim goals in the 2050 target. Recommend policies, regulations, or legislative actions that will assist in achieving the interim goals and 2050 target. Report its findings and recommendations to the governor and Office of Policy and Management in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes 22A to 200A. We are definitely going to come back to that. No later than January 1st, 2016, and biannually thereafter. And then the rest of this is just the makeup of the GC3. Well, let's scroll to the top of this. This is submitted to the Secretary of State April 22nd, 2015. That seems a lot earlier than 2019. Like, these articles are all saying that all this is that we had private companies come in 1999. We had privatization, we had deregulation or whatever, and then we're just going to jump right to 2019, and nothing happened in between. Well, there it is. There's your executive order. Well, what are those thresholds, and what is the GC3? Well, we actually can go to the GC3's report that they were required to file. Remember how they were required to file a report by January 1st, 2016? Well, we have that report. And here on page 5, in 2008, Connecticut General Assemblies passed, let's scroll up to the very beginning real quick. So here we go. GC3 Exploratory Report, a report of the Governor's Council on Climate Change, July 2015 through January of 2016, represents an exploratory phase for the Governor's GC3 and its working groups. This report summarizes the work undertaken during this period and preliminary results of those efforts, as well as recommendations for activities and further analysis in 2016. So let's then go to page 5, which we can easily do like this. And then we can go. Wait, was this page 5? Yes, here we go. So, in 2008, Connecticut's General Assembly passed the landmark Global Warming Solutions Act, mandating that the state reduce greenhouse gas emissions to at least 10% below 1990 levels by 2020 and at least 80% below 2001 levels by 2050. Since that time, Connecticut has advanced numerous other forward-thinking public policies, legislation, programs, and groundbreaking regional initiatives that address greenhouse gas emissions. Becoming a founding member of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, the first U.S. mandatory market-based regulatory program, mandatory and market-based, regulatory program and market-based. Notice the doublespeak taking place here, aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the electric power sector, a program whose revenues have enabled the state to pump millions of dollars into energy efficiency and renewable energy. So again, we have the mission here, not to create cheap energy, but to create renewable energy, whatever that means. Participating member of the New England Governors and Eastern Canadian Premier's resolution to adopt a 2030 reduction marker range of at least 35% to 45% below 1990 levels, doubling investment in cost-effective energy-efficient programs. And there's more to it than that. At the end, it makes recommendations that you will wind up seeing in the end in 22A-200A, which we have right here. Now, this has been updated since then. So there's that 2030 threshold that they were talking about. There's also the 2040 threshold that came out a few years later. So this all became law. This was all invariably coming down the pike. As soon as the GC3 releases its report, we know what's coming. And it's this. 1, not later than January 1st, 2020. The state shall reduce the levels of emissions of greenhouse gas, 1, not later than January 1st, 2020, to a level at least 10% below the level emitted in 1990. 2, not later than January 1st, 2030, to a level at least 45% below the level emitted in 2001. 3, not later than January 1st, 2040, to a level of 0% from electricity supplied to customers in the state. excuse me, not later than January 1st, 2050, to a level at least 80% below the level admitted in 2001. And 5, all of these levels referenced in this subsection shall be determined by the Commissioner of Energy and Environmental Protection, whose report we're going to come back to. So, with all of this background, what did this wind up leading to? Well, this wound up leading to the agreement with Millstone, for which we have the roll call vote right here. This is from the official page, which we're going to come back to in just a second. Excuse me. But what is actually taking place here? So in 2015 and 16, well, mostly 2016, the previous owners of Millstone came to the legislature and said, look, the federal government is coming down on us. They've imposed all of these capital improvement mandates on us all at once. And it's a ton of money and we just don't have it. In order to get that money, we have to go to a lending institution because we need the money like right now. Right now. Otherwise, we can't make these improvements. And those lending institutions wouldn't lend them the money. And the reason they wouldn't lend them the money is because they had no way to collateral. They're just not going to use a nuclear power plant as collateral. That is a difficult to collateralize debt. And the reason it's difficult to collateralize is because lending institutions don't want to own a nuclear plant. A home is something that's really easy to understand. A commercial office building is something that's really easy to understand. Something like a nuclear power plant is not only incredibly complicated, but also unbelievably heavily regulated. So lending institutions don't want to hang on to it. And that's only even if they're just basically going to, seize it and then flip it at an auction. I understand that's what they would do. The other half of that being that how long would it take to flip something like that? A really long time is the answer, by the way. And you're going to be doing it for absolutely pennies on the dollar. So when you have auctions for homes, these are homes that banks collateralize, that banks collect on, and then flip in a matter of weeks after it becomes, officially their property. That isn't what's going to take place. So what the previous Millstone owners had to do was provide a guaranteed source of a certain amount of revenue, which they obviously couldn't provide because there's no way to guarantee a certain amount. And it was a fairly high revenue demand that they were required to produce for these lending institutions, and they didn't have it. And so what they were looking at is shutting down. Now, with all of what we just showed, what's the proper response to Millstone shutting down? And they really were. They really genuinely were. And about 3 to 4 years after that, if they didn't get this agreement and thus didn't have a mechanism for securing these loans, they were going to shut down. And then what we have actually is not only way more expensive electricity, because that's how the supply and demand works. If you significantly decrease the quantity of supply without affecting demand, then what you're going to find is that the price tends to go up. That's just an axiom of the laws of supply and demand. I'm sorry, but this is Econ 101. Well, this legislation and these executive orders that originated this legislation handcuffed the legislature. And what you'll find is that if you actually talk to the people that voted in favor of this thing, they'll tell you they did so begrudgingly. And this is why this was a very split vote. This was not the partisan vote that the liars of the proverbial other side are trying to tell you it was. If you read that article on the Hartford Courant, if you read those Reddit posts, and if you got the gist from the WFSB video of what they were implying in that video, this was not down partisan lines. So we have the actual vote here. But, of course, this is kind of difficult to read. But we can jump to certain names. Billy Mo Buckby voted in favor of the thing. We can go to, this must be the Senate version of the same thing. Okay, no, we actually have to do a control F for this. Buckby. Oops, excuse me. There's Buckby. On the left, you see his Y. At the time, Steve Harding was in the legislature, in Congress. He was not a senator. He was a representative. And he voted against it. 2 Republicans that are great friends and are very much, if there is such a thing as a political alliance, very much politically allied. This was a split vote. And that's why we can go to other sites that have collated all of this. And you can see that where this bill originated was in the Senate. It was in the Senate, not in the House. So there's another lie that we're debunking right now. All of those articles Everything you've seen from the proverbial other side talking about how it was House Republicans that passed this thing. No, this originated in the Senate. It originated in the Senate. And a majority of Democrats in the Senate, 10 out of 18 is a majority, voted in favor of the thing. Of the Democrats that voted, an even larger majority, 10 out of 16 voted in favor of the thing. So you can see that this was not an entirely partisan bill. And then it went into the House. And what you'll find is that, yes, a majority of Democrats in the House voted against this, but the bill originated in the Senate. That means it came out of committee in the Senate. All of these committees, by the way, are as we talked about on the show, all of these committees, since they are the majority party, are majority Democrat and have been for an incredibly long time, way longer than this bill. So not only did it come before the committee, it passed the committee. The Democrat leaders of that committee decided to bring this bill before the committee, and it passed the committee. And then it went to the Senate floor, where it passed with a majority of Democrats voting in favor of that bill before it went to the House. And then what happened? The cynic in me wants to say what happened was Democrats realized, oh crap, Republicans are actually on board with this thing. Oh man, we gotta create a partisan issue out of this. We can't vote in favor of something. We can't actually agree broadly with Republicans because Republicans bad. That's what the cynic in me wants to say. I don't know the reason that they switched out of nowhere, but then as you can see, but then this became an actual law. This became law. Yes, it was a majority of Republicans voted in favor of the bill. But it could have gone to at the time Dana Malloy's desk, and he could have vetoed it. These are not veto-proof majorities. Let's go back to this: 75 to 66 in favor. That is not a veto-proof majority. What did we have in the Senate? 23 to 8. That is not okay. That is a veto-proof majority, but it's not a veto-proof majority in the House. You're not going to get a veto-proof majority in the House. Dana Malloy could have voted against this. So what happened? The answer is I don't know. You tell me, Democrats, why it was that this made it to the committee, right? Was actually heard by the committee, and then was voted out of committee. So it was passed by a committee which was comprised of majority Democrats, went to the Senate floor, which was a majority Democrat, and passed with majority Democrat support, and then went to the House where Democrats suddenly changed their minds, and their guy, Dana Malloy, Democrat, voted in favor of the thing. So tell me how this is a partisan Republican bill. Tell me how this original agreement, the 2016 agreement, which originated this, the 2019 was a carried in force bill, right? Like it was just saying, all right, we agree with ourselves, right? Which is why I don't really look at the 2019 vote. Because it was going to it was basically just carrying in force an already enforced bill. We really didn't even need the 2019 vote. So before anyone tries to dispel this myth, this lie to you that this was something that was all the Republicans voted in favor of this thing and none of the Democrats voted in favor of it. That's a lie, and we're dispelling that myth. You've seen it right now on your screen. You just saw it. And of course, nobody wants to ask them, these Republicans that did vote in favor of this, why they voted that way. And I explained to you why they voted that way. The idea was, we'd love to be able to tell Millstone, well, you know what? Private sector, tough luck, like in 2008, let the banks fail, right? Well, we could have let Millstone fail, and then what? How are we supposed to make up for that loss in supply, in quantity of supply? If we had an actual market environment, we could just turn to them and say, well, tough luck. We're going to have a dozen natural gas plants spring up over the next 12 months, and that'll make up for the difference. Best of luck, Millstone. But we couldn't do that. So we were faced with either buying the electricity, agreeing to that contract, or losing the electricity. And the reason that they did that was because they figured that there was some pathway to redefining nuclear as a class 1 renewable to comport with all of the laws surrounding this, which we're going to come come back to in a minute. And before we do all of that, with all of that legislation, with all of these demands that with 22A, well, let's go back to 22A real quick. With these thresholds, with these demands, we need to do a bit of a reality check. Because remember when the GC3 said that we were, it was the EO that said that we were poised to achieve the 2020 target well ahead of schedule. Well, reality check. Here's that graph. This is the report from DEEP. Remember how I told you about the Commissioner on Energy and Environmental Protection has to release this report? This is the report he released in 2022. You're not going to get more up-to-date data than this. This is the total emissions, economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions. And as you can see, in 2020, right here, you can see the mouse. We're going to go straight up into 2020. And what we wanted to do is get below to 10% below 1990. Well, we did, and we can come back to here. Oh, man, what is that? Like halfway through 2018 is where we managed to cross that threshold. And we really didn't get actually below it until 2019. So we just barely got to 10% below 1990 levels. And then, of course, we had this 2030 goal. And I'm sorry, but we're going to hit this trajectory, if we're going to look at this from a linear perspective and not from a diminished return perspective, which is a more accurate mathematical way to look at a graph like this. That's what we're going to achieve. And the answer is no. Because this is where where are the greenhouse gas emission reductions coming from? The answer is a little bit from transportation, and all of the rest is electricity. All of it. What else are you going to do in terms of residents? How are you going to make a residential home emit less greenhouse gases? Banning gas stoves, which they talked about? You're really not going to be able to do any better than what we've got in commerce, industry, municipal waste, natural gas. I mean, we're talking about already really low numbers and flat lines. And maybe a little bit more out of commerce. You know, a barely negative line in residential. So all of this is coming from the electrical consumption anyways. Which means if we go back to these demands, 0% from electricity is supplied to customers in the state by 2040. That's 16 years from now. We're really on this trajectory with the law of diminished returns. We're going to get this to zero. How are we going to do this without rationing or without being ridiculously draconian with our policy? And then the 2030 goal of to at least 45% below the level emitted in 2001 overall. Again, how are we going to do that? Where is that coming from? It's not going to come from from power plants. It's just not. There's no way to do it. Right? In fact, the only way you're going to get to zero and actually still have electricity in Connecticut is through nuclear. It's the nuclear option, and that's it. That's the only way you're going to do it. But you have to redefine nuclear as a class one renewable, which of course we haven't done. We haven't gotten to that point. It's not a class one renewable, which is completely ridiculous, but we all know what's taking place there. And like I said, when I showed you that graph, there is something called a law of diminished returns. If you want to, say, reduce the number of car accidents on the road, it's never going to be zero because this is what's called a risk profile. The nature of risk is that it can never be 1 and it can never be 0. It can't be 100%. It can't be 0. That's definitional to the notion of risk. In the same way that the number 3 is not the number 2. The number 3 is by axiom mathematically greater than the number 2. It's an axiom. It's a law of the nature of risk. And as a result, as risk profiles go down, eventually you're going to get to a point where it's just going to flatten off because you're going to get really close to 0, but you're not going to get to 0. And as you get closer and closer to 0, you'll notice that the slope of the curve gets much shallower. And what that represents is it being more and more expensive and difficult to get to those levels. And so what are we being told by legislatures? Turn down your thermostat. Why? Screw you. Why should I have to do that? It's my house. Why should your argument for you're purposely making electricity incredibly expensive, and your response is we'll just freeze your ass off. Just freeze. Make life miserable for yourself. Why? It's my house. I'm going to set the thermostat to what the thermostat is going to. I should be totally well within my rights to set that thermostat to whatever the hell I want. And screw you for telling me that I have to freeze. Screw you for telling my grandmother that she had to freeze. Why should anyone have to do that? If the electrical rates are cheap enough to begin with, you won't have to do that. If electrical rates are cheap enough and you're heating your home with electricity, why shouldn't you be able to set it to 77 degrees out and hang out in shorts and a t-shirt like you're hanging out on a day at the beach? If you want to do that, you should be able to do that. It shouldn't cost so much that you can't afford to do the opposite of that, which is to even be in like long sleeves and pajama bottoms and not be freezing friggin' cold in your own home. This isn't going to be achieved. These thresholds, I showed you. I gave you the data. This isn't going to be, these thresholds are just simply not going to be achieved. We showed the 2030 threshold. We're not going to make it. We're definitely not making the 2050 threshold, but we're still adhering to it for some reason. We're not going to do this, at the very least, without significantly raising prices or rationing. This is the law of demand played out. And for those of you who, and I know what the response is from the other side, because I've gone through this debate with the other proverbial side, who tells me economics isn't the science. No, fundamental statements of the human condition are fundamental statements of the human condition. And it is a fundamental statement of the human condition that everyone desires to improve their station. It is a fundamental element of the human condition for you to desire to improve your station at all times. And this fundamental this fundamental element of the human condition, is what leads us to scarcity. And scarcity is the axiom, the foundational principle of all of economics. You can talk about certain things without talking about scarcity. Scarcity is that principle. It's the principle that human beings' capacity to desire more or to improve their station will always necessarily exceed his ability to produce in a manner that perpetually fulfills that desire. This is an axiom of economics. It's as essential to economics as thermodynamics and the law of conservation of energy is to physics. You can talk about things that don't involve the law of conservation of energy. You're not talking about physics. You can talk about things that reject the notion of scarcity. You're not talking about economics. So why are we talking about all of this? Yes, 7% of the uptick this year in public benefits is the Milford Agreement. And the reason for that, which we'll have to do an entire other video on, is to compensate them for an opportunity cost because natural gas is right now cheaper than nuclear in this instant. And the price of natural gas, of course, fluctuates over time. So in general, nuclear is cheaper over the very long run, but there may be periods of time where nuclear isn't, and this is one of them. And of course, when they bring up the 77% uptick, remember to ask, why was the agreement made? And now you know. Now you know why the agreement was made. And it was because of this regulatory environment that handcuffed those legislators. But more important than that, how is electricity actually purchased? Because it's not like you're going to Millstone and you're writing a check to Millstone to provide electricity directly to your home. Right? Like, why couldn't we just buy cheap natural gas credits, let's say, on an open market? Let's say that the nuclear deal, right, is too expensive. So what do? What we would do is we would go over to New York and say, well, why don't you, we'll pay you, right, and your cheaper electricity with your natural gas to provide us with some of your electricity. And you have these energy credits, these offsets. Well, we know why we couldn't. We know why we can't do that now, and it's because we can't. It's illegal because of 22A-200A and all of the surrounding legislation around it. In this case, there is no market. This is the real root of the problem. There is no market. Otherwise, we could just cross the state line and buy energy from someone else, which you can't do. It's illegal. But even if you could do either, you would still be forced to offset that natural gas with what's called a REC. Well, what is a REC? Well, we have that. A REC is from Connecticut's Renewable Portfolio Standard. The Connecticut Renewable Portfolio Standard is a state policy that requires electric providers, so that would be Eversource and UI, to offset a specified percentage or amount of the energy they generate or sell by purchasing renewable energy credits from renewable sources. So what are these actual RECs? Whenever you put solar on your home and your roof, the excess of that electricity goes into what's called the green bank for the most part, and energy providers are required by law to buy that. There are a handful of cases where you're buying not residential rooftop solar, you're buying some other form of solar or wind, and to much lesser extent hydroelectric, but that's what a REC is, in short. Owners of electricity generation projects that qualify as renewable under one of these three classes can receive one REC for every megawatt hour of electricity they produce. These RECs are tradable commodities that allow the environmental attribute of the renewable energy to be bought and sold separately from the energy commodity itself. A renewable generator can either contract to sell its energy bundled with the accompanying attribute value directly to an electrical provider, usually at a premium above the wholesale electric price, which we'll come back to, or it can be unbundled, the REC and the energy, and sell them separately in regional wholesale markets. Separate portfolio standards are required for energy source classified as Class 1 or Class 2. So very briefly, let's go over Class 1 renewables as defined in 16-1A 20 of the General Statute of Connecticut. Solar, wind, a fuel cell, geothermal, landfill methane gas, anaerobic digestion, or biogas derived from biological sources. Thermal electric direct energy conversions from a certified Class 1 renewable energy source. Ocean thermal power, wave or tidal power, low emission advanced renewable energy conversion technologies, including but not limited to zero emission low grade heat power generation systems. These are heat pumps based on organic or oil free ranking, clean or similar non-stream cycles that use waste heat from an industrial commercial process. Oh, excuse me. This is like vegetable oil, basically burning of excess fryer oil. A run-of-the-river hydropower facility that began operation after July 1st, 2003, which are none of them, and has a generating capacity of not more than 30 megawatts, or a run-of-the-river hydropower facility that received a new license after January 1st, 2018 under the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission rules pursuant to 18 whatever, as amended from time to time, and provided the facility is not based in a new dam or a dam identified as a candidate for removal. A biomass facility that uses sustainable biomass fuel. What stands out about what's not on that list? The cleanest, safest, cheapest, most reliable energy source humanity has ever produced. Nuclear. So that means with all of the nuclear that they have to buy, that Eversource has to buy, is required to buy. Not only are they required to buy it, they have to offset a certain percentage of what they buy by additionally buying these way, way, way more expensive energy sources. These electricity sources like solar, wind, etc. that you see, these Class 1s. Well, how much is that? How much are they required to buy? Well, we actually have that chart right here. It started off in 2018 as a total of 25%. And in 2025, since that's the year we're talking about, we're looking at 38%. This is just a 38% tax. Folks, this is what you're looking at right now. When it comes to the supplier, when it comes to Eversource, every penny that they spend buying from Millstone, which that's 70% of your bill, right? Of the public benefits portion of your bill. That's 77%. On top of that, in the I can't remember if it's supply or delivery. In the delivery portion of your bill, There's another 38% fee on top of that. That's not even a 38% fee. It's actually way more than that. Because these RECs are way, way more expensive to buy than just buying directly natural gas, coal, to a lesser extent oil, trash burning fuel, which we have in Connecticut. There's a Bridgeport facility that burns garbage and generates electricity from that. And again, the cleanest, safest, cheapest, most reliable source in all of human history of electricity, nuclear. Nuclear. So if you want to see the rest of your bill go down, and the crazy thing is that this also applies to the generator. So not only is EverSource having to buy another 38% from these RECs, Millstone, the plant, as they're generating it, has to buy back a 38% portion of what they generate back in RECs. They're forced to do this. You want to see your electric bills come down, that's what's going to, that in reality, getting rid of these stupid REC laws, that's what's going to do it. But of course, we don't have a market for this sort of thing because we don't even have a market for these RECs because you could just cross the state line, but no, you can't. You can't. It's illegal to cross the state line now. In terms of the results of 22 of that piece of legislation I showed you, 22A-200A, this is really the big problem, is the RECs. And the thing is that this is something that we can point to. Now, I told you all about this town hall that was conducted in the town of Milford, right here where I'm from. I told you all to go to this resource. I told you all to watch it. And a live special town hall with EverSource, December 2nd, 2024. 155 views. There should be at least a comma in this. For all of your outrage, the singular best resource for information on this sort of thing. And you're the single best direct access you could possibly get with not only representatives from EverSource, but with your legislators, with legislators. We had a member of the Senate and 2 members of the House come to that meeting to answer your questions in person and virtually. 155 views, folks. And what was really revealing more than everything else there was what Trevor Herbest had to say at public comment. So you were allowed to come to the podium and say what you had to say. Trevor Herbest is a retailer for electrical generation who operates primarily out of Connecticut. He is a retailer across a licensed retailer that operates in I think 13 different states. He's the guy. He knows this stuff better than anyone else. He's the one that's going to be able to tell you, excuse me. He's the one that's going to be able to tell you how all of this works. And at that meeting, if you saw this is December 2nd, 2004. This is over a month ago. He explained everything that took place. He explained all of these problems with the RECs.
Because the sheer root of the problem is the RECs. Let's call it what it is. You guys want 37% officials, right, that are appointing the commissioners, approving these step-ups. In 2018, it was 24%, I believe, off the top of my head. It's not so much that you have to buy the power from these resources. They have to go and offset 37% of what they delivered to the consumer in renewable energy credits, right? So let's just talk about tier 1 REC right now. It's $40 a megawatt hour. It's insane. $20 for a tier 3. Tier 2 was crap. It's trash. I mean, the fact that we even allow that to happen is pretty gross. But so let's just think about that. That's $60 a megawatt hour. And I'm saying all this because CLP, if I created a supplier, as you mentioned before, I would have to offset my delivered energy by 37%. So again, let's get back to the root cause. It's RECs, right? So I agree. I mean, I deal with this in the state of New York. Oh gosh, I mean, this is where it gets crazy. They want to be about 50% in the next 5 to 6 years, right? I used to buy Texas RECs for $3, $4 a REC. All of a sudden, I had to buy in-state RECs in order to serve those customers. The ACP charge, we know what an ACP charge is? Alternative compliance. You know what that is? A cash payment to the Pura, in this case, if I don't buy those RECs. So again, it all comes back to these rec programs. So I just want to understand that, to your point, it's not always Eversource. It's not the utility. Actually, when I dealt with the 30, 40 utilities, I thought they were the enemy, and it's not. It's the commissions. It used to be a 60-40 split, supply, delivery. That's changed. 60-40, the opposite direction, right? Why is that? All these programs and everything else we're paying. And again, who's approving those commissions? It's not Eversource, it's Pure, right? So again, unfortunately, the buck has to go somewhere.
And the buck in the end goes to the legislature because that's where it matters. Because that's where all of these problems originate from. Worse, if we wanted to get natural gas plants in the state, let's say we could repeal all of this and still get natural gas plants in the state, you have to connect it into the system. So with all of the problems that Trevor just laid out, there's still the problem of what would you even do even if you could get the natural gas plants to emerge here in the state of Connecticut?
The other problem besides the RECs is you hit the nail on the head, transmission capacity. I could go put a solar field down in that brown field right now and I can't deliver the power. You guys won't even give me the power. Would you guys allow me to run lines underneath, over, or above on your poles? I'll get a line truck out there tomorrow. Can't do it. So again, you guys incentivize programs, and I see you guys Pure incentivize all these programs, hands out money to solar fields and all these other renewables, you can't even deliver the energy.
So with all of that said, we don't have a market, and that's the problem. And we're going to come back to that in just a minute. But when it comes to actual solutions, because that's why you're watching this video, you don't want to hear me complain. You don't want to hear me just say, this is the problem. And I'm not, anyone who knows me knows I'm not the guy to sit here and say, here's a problem and complain without providing a solution. And the real solution in the end is we've got to repeal 22A-200A and get rid of the RECs program. But that's just pie in the sky, not going to happen. In order to have a market, you have to get rid of those two things. But you take the wins where you can get them. And this is going to take baby steps. And it's going to take us a while to get to that point. The first step in all of this, of course, is awareness, which happened. And you can thank State Representative Billy Mo Buckby for that. Because it was State Representative Billy Mo Buckby right here in New Milford, my representative in the Connecticut 67th District, that led the charge and was the lead sponsor on the bill to get the public benefits charges separated on your bill, bifurcated, so that you could see what was taking place. And this is the source of all of this outrage. There probably wouldn't be this outrage if it wasn't for the fact that Billy Mo Buckby was the one who shone daylight on this sort of thing. Daylight being, in many cases, the best disinfectant. And in this case, it is the best disinfectant. Now, that's just the very first tiny little step. And I know what the other side is saying. Well, the Republicans aren't actually proposing anything. No, we saw that. You saw the bumper video. For anyone who was here before we started, roll back the tape before we started. 17 minutes of Republicans going over what proposals they have to address all of this. And the Big Five proposal, we talked about this on previous streams too. Here we go. This is from May 17th, 2024. Connecticut Senate GOP statement on Eversource filing and cost of Connecticut electricity. And we can scroll right down to the bottom. The Republicans' amendment, which was voted down by majority Democrats, sought to do the following. So there's their solutions. These are the big five things that Senate Republicans want to do. 1, limit all for future power purchase agreements so that no contract can be more than 150% over the wholesale electric market price. Right, remember those RECs? Remember how you're having to pay like 10 times the market price for these RECs? What do you think Eversource buys your electricity back at a rate? What's the rate do you think that Eversource buys that electricity back from you when you've generated it on your rooftop solar? Is it the like 9 cents a kilowatt hour that you're being charged right now in your bill for the generation over at, wherever it's being generated across multiple power plants? No. It's 3 to 4 times that amount. The buyback is something like 30 to 40 cents a kilowatt hour. So step 2, redefine class 1 renewable energy sources to include all forms of hydropower, not just the kind that they were talking about, and all nuclear power to lower the cost of renewable energy sources and bring relief for ratepayers. This is a big one. Because then all of those REC buybacks, almost all of them will disappear. Because the REC buybacks that Millstone has to make, gone. The rec buybacks that UI and Eversource have to make from their purchase of electricity from Millstone, gone. The rules regarding the rec buybacks, right? Like, now all of a sudden you can just do all of your buybacks through credit swaps with Millstone. That's a way, way, way cheaper way of doing things, especially since it's here in Connecticut. Remember what Trevor said? You can't cross the state line anymore. He used to be able to buy these things. He used to be able to buy energy credits from Texas for $3 or $4 per megawatt hour. And now he's having to buy them for $40 to $60 a megawatt hour. This is this is between 10 and 20 times the price that you should be paying for it because of the regulatory environment. 3, separate the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection and separate the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection and PURA. That's right, PURA, the regulatory authority that's supposed to be monitoring your bills and monitoring what Eversource does to make sure, things are operating so that you save money, has to answer to DEEP, whose initiative is green energy, in direct conflict with the mission of PURA. Why does PURA answer to an agency whose originating mission is, by definition, in direct conflict with that of PURA? 4, study ways to increase natural gas supply in the New England region. You don't say. 5, study moving public policy charges off the ratepayer bills and onto the budget. If you want to ban the public benefits charges, that's how you have to do it. That's the way it was going to take place. So for those saying that the GOP, the Republicans don't have ideas, again, you saw the bumper video. I've shown the receipts. I come bearing receipts. I've explained how these things actually work as actual fixes too. You may have also seen my show a few weeks ago where Billy Mo Buckby, who is ranking member of the Energy and Technology, laid out his big 4 totally reasonable actual fixes. This is 3, I think.
We need to audit the program. The other pieces that are in there are the 41 different programs that are allowing you to say, hey, put solar panels on your house, put a heat pump in your house. All these programs you're paying for, I'm paying for, the people are paying for. And we want to audit those programs because there's 41 programs that have never been audited. We're going to be putting this in as a bill. Should all go well for us on Tuesday. We want to audit all 41 of those programs. We need to talk to the governor about this being a budget line item for the pay down of the low-income benefits that we offered. We need to revisit every bit of the green energy purchases. The power purchase agreements need to be done. And then the biggest part I think that people have overlooked, we need to talk to those third-party energy suppliers too that have been really chased out of the state. We have some great companies, and that's why third-party energy supply is there, is to bring competition, and some of these people got pushed out. We need to talk to them about how we can get them back in the state to bring that competition back and to help bring that down. I think all 4 parts of that become a critical piece to driving the price down. The power purchase agreement should not be done by the state to start with.
So Republicans have absolutely been talking about this and providing real solutions for a long time, and endlessly for that matter. And they've been trying to put together actual solutions, and they've been running into the Democrat buzzsaw. So don't let the opposition lie. Point them to my show. Link is right at the top of your screen. Point them to my show where we're going through everything in painstaking detail. We're showing the receipts. And again, the real problem with all of this at its source is the recs. It's the legislation that produces the recs, and it's the legislation around it. We don't have a market system. You saw Trevor Herbest, a retailer, an actual retailer for electricity, right? This is how these things actually work. This is how electricity is actually bought and sold. You saw him speak toward this. And the reality is that 22A-200A needs to be repealed. And this is the sole source of all of this just crap. All of this crap. Everything else is a step in the right direction, but it's going to wind up being a very small step, especially if we can't get rid of 22A-200A. And by the way, when it comes to repealing 22A-200A, we all know the Republicans will do that. And the Democrats don't want to do that. Instead, Democrats will point to, as you've all seen, and some of us are falling for this, so don't fall for this, things that either won't do anything or just are irrelevant. For example, the CEO salary. Yeah, we all read that article with the CEO, and we've been through this. We did the math on stream. We pulled out the calculator on stream. We've done it twice now, right? The CEO's salary was 1.2 million, and with equity payouts, it worked out to a total payout of I think it was 18.4 or 18.6 million dollars. Eversource has over 4 million customers. In fact, it's somewhere in the area of 4.5 million customers. If you were to just make that payout zero and distribute it between all of the customers, it would save you and me $4 a year. This is irrelevant. This is nothing. $4 a year is not the problem here. Envy is no way to build an economic model, and it's not going to solve this problem. Price caps, you're hearing from Democrats. Well, what happens with price caps? Well, anyone who's been in an introductory level economics class, of course, knows exactly what happens when you introduce price controls. You significantly reduce supplies. You create shortages. This is an axiom of economics. It's as definitionally true as things like the sum of all energy, atomic energy in a system is E equals mc squared, right? And you don't even need to test this. You don't even need to put this to the test. We can just derive this from thermodynamics. Just the laws of physics. It's the same thing is true. We can just derive this from scarcity. We can derive this from the law of demand. In fact, you can actually derive it from the law of supply. And they're going to talk about more government offsets. There's no such thing as a free lunch. If government writes a check, it has to come from you somehow. It's coming from you. Either in the form of a tax or in the form of a tax down the road, which is an even more expensive tax in the form of a loan, or in the case of printing money, it comes in the form of inflation. It comes in the form of a tax on you by virtue of everything being way, way, way more expensive. More government control. You know, you're seeing the other side saying the state should just step in and control everything. And we know exactly how that's going to work, right? We saw that before, and we're seeing the problems are regulatory. So introducing even more regulation into the environment, what's that going to do? If I take this calculator, right, and I drop it, and we watch this frame by frame as it falls towards the earth, right, and there's just this paper thin distance between the calculator and the earth. And we watched, let's say a high-speed camera, 10,000 frames a second. We've watched 9,999 frames. And the frame, with one frame left, it's a paper-thin distance between the calculator and the earth. What's going to happen in the next frame? Is it going to suddenly jump up into the sky, or is the next frame, is it going to hit the earth? More government control is not the solution here, and we know that. And the opposition is going to point towards things like Wallingford, municipal control over these over electrical delivery. Well, what you have here, what you actually have here, is devolution working at place. This is the tiniest iota of reintroduction of market conditions and market competition. Suddenly, the prices fall off a cliff. And what's really at stake here? Well, remember that WFSB video? Well, we have a clip from that video because WFSB accidentally let it slip why it is that electricity in Wallingford is so much cheaper than everything else.
So far in this I-team presentation of rising rates, we've talked a lot about the public benefits charge. But if you live in one of these 7 places, you don't pay that charge at all. That's because these towns and cities have municipal power, which is locally controlled. We sat down with the CEO of the company that runs the power for 6 out of 7 of these places to find out if it's possible for other towns to follow suit. The beauty of Norwich is one of the reasons Andrew Pig moved here and opened a business downtown. And when he received his first electric bill, he found a new reason to love the city.
We were actually kind of pleasantly surprised because our power bills was substantially less.
That's because if you live in Norwich, your electricity comes from Norwich Public Utilities. It's one of 6 local power companies that make up CMEC, the Connecticut Municipal Electric Energy Cooperative. Dave Meisinger is the CEO. He explains how the average electric bill within CMEC compares to an Eversource or United Illuminating bill.
In the last 5-6 years, we've been roughly 20 to 40% less. And there's a lot of reasons for that.
One of the reasons is many of the state rules and regulations that apply to Eversource and UI do not apply to CMEC. Meisinger says the supply rate is often also cheaper because CMEC's members have more freedom over how to purchase power.
Eversource and UI are required to procure the wholesale energy in a very specific way, and they're doing it over a relatively short period of time. Whereas at CMEC, we're not mandated by anyone other than ourselves.
You don't say. The second we actually deregulate and introduce free market principles, the prices fall off a cliff. Interesting that WFSB only glanced over this and then just immediately moves on in a 20-minute long video. They don't talk about the fact that the reason that these rates are so much lower in these communities is because they don't have to abide by this ridiculous mountain of regulation. They don't have to buy the RECs. They can purchase their electricity through whatever means that they want to. And as you just saw, as WFSB buried the lead but let it quietly slip, the problem is the regulation, and the solution is deregulation, not more. And the too long don't read version of these solutions is election in November. And unfortunately, in November, we didn't vote red. If you wanted this stuff to go away in November, that was the time to take care of it. Connecticut swung red at the presidential, but not at the state level, which, when it comes to this sort of thing, is what matters. Excuse me. So, unfortunately, yeah, we've shown this before, but this is the state house results, and although it doesn't look, I haven't done one for the Senate, I had to put this together. This is what I put together for the House, and I know that might be difficult kind of to read, so I put this in the form of a pie graph so you guys could read it more easily. Democrats expanded their majority to a now super majority. So now they can really do whatever the hell they want. Genuinely whatever the hell they want. We lost. We lost in November. But now and that's it. It's over. We lost. There was super majority in both houses. But is this fight over? No. It's 2025. Again, this is a preview of what's to come. What can actually be done? What can we actually do? And one of the things that we don't want to do is say die. We never say die. One of the things you can actually do is get organized. And I don't mean just like get groups together. I mean, lay out the 3 or 4 things we want, right? That could plausibly get done, right? Such as pull public benefits off the bill and put it all on the House floor. Decouple Pura from DEEP. Declassify nuclear as a Class 1 renewable. And the thing is that it's what matters when it comes to all of this is the committee. So if you're writing to your legislature, focus more on the committee. My legislators are in New Milford, in New Milford's 108th, which is not where I am, is Pat Callahan. In the 67th, it's Billy Moak Buckby. And in the 30th Senate District, it's Steve Harding. And these guys are already on our side. We don't need to write to them, but it's the committee that we need to focus on. And again, if you guys have seen my show, this is from over a year ago. This is now Senate Minority Leader on my show, Steve Harding, coming on to explain that it's the committee that matters.
Many bills, and I would say probably, most bills usually die in committee. So that's called screening. The chairs of the committees can have their own screening meetings. And however, as a custom in Hartford, at least since I've been there, and I understand it to be a long custom in Hartford, long prior to me being there, the ranking members, which means the highest ranking Republican senator and the highest ranking Republican House member, are also invited into the screening with the chairs. You have a meeting with the chairs, and you go over every single bill that's sent to you, and then you say, okay, this one. Let's have a public hearing on it. No, not this one. Let it just die. We're not going to do anything with this. We're going to do something with that. As you'd expect, when you have 151 state reps and 36 state senators, you have a lot of redundant proposals. So it's a lot of redundancies, not only in terms of the bills that are proposed the same exact session by different legislators, but it's a lot of redundancy in bills that you've seen before. Generally, how the House and the Senate work is almost nothing gets brought out to the floor of the chamber unless they know it's going to pass. Okay. So usually it's not like, this bill, this person wants to vote on it, they throw it up and it doesn't pass. If a bill comes out, I think I've only seen one time where a bill has actually come out and actually failed on the House floor or the
Interesting.
Senate floor.
Interesting.
So it does. So the leadership in the House and the Senate do not bring a bill out unless they know they have the votes for the bill.
So everything is the committee. The committee is everything. We need to focus our efforts on the committee. Don't waste your time with anyone who's outside of the Energy and Technology Committee. And by the way, here's that list. And I'll scroll through this very slowly, real quick, so that those who are watching in posterity can freeze frame and get this information. I had to dig this up in the web archive because it's, for some reason, no longer on the state's website. I guess it's because they're going to make these committee assignments in this first few days of open session at the legislature. At the tippity top of this list are the two co-chairs, and they're probably going to be the same moving forward. The membership of these committees, as has been explained 100 times in the show, is going to stay basically identical, right? And what you're going to see is ranking members Ryan Fazio and Billy Buckby are going to be on our side. We don't need to write to them. At the top of this list is Norm Needleman and Jonathan Steinberg. These are the two guys you need to be emailing and writing to. Again, the website is on your screen. The website is on your screen. And we're going to zoom in on this and we're going to highlight it so that you guys can get it. These are the people we need to reach out to. I'm sure we can look them up. I'm sure that they have House emails. And what you need to do is write to them, to their house, not their home address, but their address in the House and their address in the Senate in Hartford, right? And send them emails and do it with civility. Don't get ourselves in trouble. No Fed posting. Okay? Get yourself organized. Get your ideas together. And with your ideas together, get it down to like a page, because they're not going to read more than that. And if we bombard them with one-pagers saying, here are the 3 or 4 things we want, then they'll have no choice. They'll have no choice but to at least acknowledge that bombardment. This is what we need to do moving forward. This is the solution. These are the solutions. Write to these committee members. There is a thing called the power of concentration. We don't have unlimited resources. So what we can do is we can focus our energy and our time and our efforts and maybe some money. I don't know. Maybe there's money in postage and stuff like that if you're going to deal with that on the places where it matters. Writing to your representative, writing to your senator is not going to be as useful as writing to these guys. And this isn't doxing. This isn't some sort of smear campaign or anything like this. You are 100% well within your right to write to any member of the Senate or House in Hartford, in the legislature. So that's where we need to focus our efforts. Now, this show, we've been talking an awful lot about what's taking place at the state level. We're way over time. So when it comes to the local level, all I'm going to do basically is briefly mention that we are in budget season. Budget season kicks off next week. In fact, a week from today, on the 14th, as the Board of Ed begins its budget hearing process at 6:30 p.m. Tuesday next week at Sarah Noble Intermediate School in the Library Media Center. And they'll be continuing that on the 15th, 21st, and 22nd. The budget adoption is scheduled for the 22nd. The municipal side of all of this usually takes place about usually towards the end of February, and then carrying on through into March. And then the last of the procedural items take place in April before it goes before the vote to referendum before the voters in May. Generally speaking, that's how this operates. So just to let folks know, here in New Milford, our budget season's about to begin, and the kickoff dates are with the Board of Ed on the 14th and 15th of next week. So with that, let's see if we have any comments and questions. I don't see anything in Facebook. I don't see anything in YouTube. So for anyone who is stuck with us, please do share this video. This is going to be the best resource people are going to have to combat the lies and the smears from the other side. Again, I provided the receipts. I showed you everything that could be there. Share this video. Please do share this video. And for those who did stick through, for those who do wind up sharing, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I do this for you guys. I don't do this for money. I do this because I think it's the right thing to do. And I got to thank the audience for whoever is here and whoever's watches. Thank the audience for tuning in. I'm not sure what I'm going to do in this next. I'm hoping to get back to a regular schedule of Sunday nights. But I think what I'm going to try to do is this video, but in a scripted format. So everything's a lot more condensed, so we can get this done in less than an hour and 20 minutes. And so it's not just me rambling, and so that I can do a better job of providing even more receipts and to combating even more of those. So that's the video I'm going to be working on next on this channel. Hopefully that'll afford me some time to go live Sunday night. We'll see how things go. Until the next time that we have this show, thanks for everyone for tuning in. Good night.